This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Andrew Pierce.
So an interesting idea in the Times today, the headline, Understand White Privilege, Nurseries told. Nursery teachers should be trained in understanding white privilege and how racism affects children from an early age. The Early Years Coalition, which represents tens of thousands of nursery and other providers, said that training teachers would help children recognise racist behaviours and develop anti-racist views. The coalition says in its report called Birth to Five Matters that there is a mistaken assumption that treating all people in the same way and ignoring differences in race is a sufficient response to racism. The advice says it's time to challenge the widespread notion that children do not see race and are colourblind to difference. Some Tory MPs have criticised this, saying it's the wrong way to go about combating racism, as it risked early years learning becoming some kind of, quotes, political Soviet indoctrination session. Well, I wonder what your view is about that. I'm going to talk now to Smita Tharoor, who is the author of the podcast series Between Our Stories of Unconscious of Bias, and she is an unconscious bias trainer and joins me now. Smita, what's your view of this? At what age should we be teaching youngsters about white privilege, and how would you define white privilege?
Thank you for this. Firstly, I don't think we should be teaching children about white privilege, because if we are starting to teach children about better and worse, which is what the word privilege suggests, then we're automatically creating a more divisive community, whether it's a school, whether it's amongst adults. What we need to be teaching children is about fairness. And all children, in fact, one of the two articles that I read, I thought either it was the Daily Telegraph or the Times, suggests that children have a strong sense of fairness. And that is completely correct. So let's evoke the children's strong sense of fairness and make sure that they're more equal and inclusive about accepting differences in their classroom, rather than suggesting that one is better than the other because of the colour of their skin. That really genuinely worries me. And what is white privilege? Well, I'm not white, so I'm not able to really answer that question. Perhaps you need to ask somebody who's white. But my very minimal understanding of what white privilege suggests is that people who are white are automatically denoted with a certain extra privilege that perhaps I do not have because I am not white. Now, that's also far too much of a blanket statement, because we know that there are many white folk in this city who are not privileged from their perspective. They've come from Romania, they've come from Poland, they're struggling to make ends meet. They could be people who are born and brought up in this country who have not had the socioeconomic privileges that perhaps I have, and I'm not white. And so how can we then put people into boxes and suggest one is better than the other?
And of course, the reports that caused such a fuss last week, about racism, Smita. One of the issues that was that people seized on to criticise the report was that they said not enough attention is given to the white working class, who often are among the worst educational achievers.
Exactly, and so my fear is that society, in the need to be more inclusive, is actually ending up becoming more divisive. And that really worries me, because what we want to do is create an inclusive community. But the more I'm reading, whether it's today's article or a few days ago with Tony Sewell's comments, it's very much about ticking a box. That's how I see it. And what we want to be doing, and if I'm talking about the 0 to 5-year-olds, these are little kids.
Yeah.
They do genuinely want to be brought up with a strong sense of fairness. The article also suggests that they want to be amongst their own. Of course they do. Nothing wrong with that. That's not a criticism. If I'm 5 years old and I'm in a primary school and I'm of Indian origin, and I see another kid who looks like me because we're the same colour skin, my instinctive unconscious could be that I want to go and sit with them. It doesn't matter about the gender. That doesn't make me lesser than. The point then arises is when I then say to someone else who doesn't look like me, you're bad and I'm good. And that's when the teachers need to crack down and say, hang on a minute, young child, that's not right. That's unfair. And children understand unfairness so easily. So that's what we need to encourage.
Yeah, this report also says children develop biases in favour of their own race from as young as 9 months. Do you agree with that?
I see the point is the word bias, because a lot of people think of the word bias and have an unconscious bias connotation as the fact that it's negative. But the word bias just means preference. So yes, if a little child aged 9 months has a preference for someone who looks like them, what's wrong with that? Of course I agree with this. What's the big deal is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm just not sure that a 9-month-old child would particularly register, would it?
Well, it's interesting because I have, 3 adult children now, but they were all 9 months at some point in their lives. And I do remember when they saw people who visually looked different to them, they were a little bit more cautious in how they reacted. And 9 months particularly, when we talk about the early years development, and I'm not a child psychologist, and it's a long time ago, so I may well have forgotten, but 9 months is when the children have stranger anxiety. And therefore, at 9 months, if they've only grown up and their immediate loving circle are, say, Indian, and I'm Indian, and then they happen to meet you when you are white, they might think, oh, this one doesn't look like the one I know and I'm comfortable with. And that's called stranger anxiety in terms of children's psychology terms. But that doesn't make them, what you're using, in my opinion, a negative connotation of preference. Because of course they have a preference to what they feel safe in, what they feel comfortable in. This is my own, I'm safe, I'm cozy, I'm happy. You don't look the same as me, I'm not feeling that safe. There's nothing wrong with that, it's not a criticism.
Yeah. And how important is it, in your view, Smita, that we talk about race to children at a very early age?
Well, I didn't.
Right.
My three sons, who are of Indian ethnicity, were born and brought up in London. What I taught them was about fairness from a very early age.
Right.
What I taught them was about being inclusive in a very early age. What I taught them is about not being good and bad. I mean, I remember my eldest son, who's 31 now, whose favourite colour was a cerise pink.
Right.
And we went, and this is a long time ago, we went to Woolworths and we bought him his first pair of gloves, which was a cerise pink pair of gloves. And I wasn't going to say, you can't wear those gloves because you're a boy. He wore those gloves, he went to nursery school, and at some point he came back and said, well, you know, my friends are saying that pink is a girl's colour. And I said, well, listen, if you don't want to wear it, we'll get you a pair of black gloves, no big deal. And the funny thing is I still have those pink gloves with me. But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
It really is about encouraging young children, 0, 1, 2, 3, any age, to be fair, to be right, to be accepting, to be inclusive. And we can all do it, no matter what our cultural heritage is, what our socioeconomic status is, what our ethnicity is.
Very interesting. That's Smita Tharoor, who is the author of the podcast series Between Our Stories of Unconscious of Bias. She's an unconscious bias trainer. I'm joined now by